And without further ado, tonight's motion is this House believes reform is fit to govern. And opening the argument on proposition is our very own Director of Press, Benedict Masters.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam President. See, it's often good practice for the first speaker to set the definitions and boundaries of a debate. I will not do this. Instead, I want to set a tone, because I don't think many people here in sort of sheltered academia even want to understand the world which has led to reform's growth in Britain today. So, let's take a walk down a normal British town. What do you see? I see small businesses failing and shutting down in the hundreds, pubs, shops, and restaurants alike. And in their place, I see barbers and vape shops all empty, but somehow all still open. I see families scared to let their children play unsupervised, mothers scared that their child would interact with gang culture, and I see ordinary people sick of bureaucracy, sick of the state, ordinary people sick of how the politicians ignore them, or more accurately, how politicians revile them. And this is where reform has come from. The more you try to deny it, to deny the problems that scare millions of Brits stiff, the more reform will come to dominate our politics. But before I go further, it falls upon me to introduce the opposition for tonight's debate. Speaking first is our own librarian, Prajwal Pandey, also a third year at New College. It'll be exciting to hear what I'm sure will be piercing criticism of the right wing from a man who ran to become the political officer of the Conservative Association and lost. Next is Josh Babarinde, President of the Liberal Democrats. I was asked how many Lib Dems it would take to change a light bulb. I would answer 0. No matter how many are there, they'll all blame Elon Musk for it breaking, and yet will do nothing to fix it. After him is Rachel Millward, Deputy Leader of the Greens. Rachel earned her bachelor's from St. Hugh's College, one of the furthest out from the centre of town. If she were to leave now to visit her first-year room, I'm confident that by the time she comes back, she'll still have a front-row seat to next week's debate. After her, we'll hear from Sir Desmond Swayne, a serial Tory cabinet minister and an MP since 1997. Given how he's seemingly in the only safe seat in the country right now, of course he won't support reform. In 5 years, he'll be the only Tory MP left, and that's a very easy leadership contest. Finally, we'll hear from Ian Blackford, a former leader of the SNP. Now, a little-known fact about Ian is he supports Hibernian FC in Edinburgh. They have not won the Scottish Premiership since 1952. I can only hope his ideas are not as outdated as his team. Madam President, these are your speakers, and they are most welcome. Now, you'll have noticed these speakers represent a wide range of older parties. Now, these parties were at some point or another bigger than reform. So, unlike reform, they've had decades and sometimes centuries to prove themselves. The Britain that we see today is a product of these parties, and it is not a good place for a young person to be. Student loans, brought in by Labour, doubled down by the Tories, put us in debt until we retire, so we may as well not go to university. The welfare state has made it so that junior doctors and junior barristers may as well not work at all, because those who do nothing are paid the same and sometimes more. Our food, our houses, and our fuel costs more, but our wages have not changed. I'm a law student at Oxford, and I'm not sure that I can get on the housing ladder before I turn 40. And the state has stopped pretending it cares about this. The words two-tier policing, two-tier justice are so normal under Labour that we don't really feel anything when we hear them. But we should feel something. This is not normal. It goes against everything that Britain stands for. But we're starting to feel. That's why up and down the country, people are so disturbed by each new injustice we see on social media or on the news. The violence always being entirely preventable. When the public find out, they protest, increasingly often. But these protests do not come from a fringe far right. Tens of millions of Brits definitionally cannot be on the fringe. Maybe they're just fed up of a useless, unchanging, and uncaring status quo. Maybe if the government even pretended to care about equality of treatment, this would not have happened. Ooh, shit. Sorry. No more of my speech, so we're going to go off the cuff.
Point of information.
Sure.
Is reformers ready to govern as you are to give that speech then, if you cannot even keep the papers?
I would blame. I will quite happily blame our Chief of Staff, Mr. Aaron Zalecki. It's not me, sadly, but still, we will. So, people didn't care. This will happen. So, what we're trying to say here is that the gap between the views of the people and the views of the MPs has never been starker. Boris Johnson became Prime Minister on his stated policy of low migration after Brexit. Alas, he caused the single biggest wave of immigration in our nation's history. Parties promised investment, but when elected, claim austerity. They promise change, but deliver the exact same programme as their predecessors, with a funky new tie. The entire British political establishment thinks that they are above the people who gave them legitimacy. And it's no wonder that we can see in the polls a stark difference between Reform and the old guard. If we look at the MPs from any other party, they are careerists who are parachuted into safe seats, they are tight-lipped, they are media-trained, they know what to say and when.
Point of information, and I'm sure a Reform MP would never defect for career-oriented reasons.
Look behind you.
As a former member of the Conservative Party, I cannot confirm or deny these allegations. Still, often the Reform MPs are not tight-lipped, not media-trained, but that's no bad thing. The British people deserve people who represent them. They deserve people who represent their views. They deserve plumbers, they deserve farmers, they deserve people who relate to them and have been through the struggle of what it's like to live in modern Britain.
Point of information. Are Richard Tyson and Nigel Farage being multi-millionaires representative of the ordinary person?
Dare I raise? The House of Commons has 650 members. And surely, given the next government, at least 649 will be Reform. I'm sure that they'll be quite easily outweighed by the majority. It's clear, then, that when I say Reform is fit to govern, I could just as well be saying that the British people are fit to govern. The British people are fit to choose their own destiny. After decades of managed decline, courtesy of stuffy quangos, dodgy advisors, and careerist snobs, only the hard-working, smart, and honest British people can restore Britain. Or, to put it a different way, to put it a different way, things can only get better. Thank you.
Thank you for that speech, Benedict. I now look to the opening case on opposition, our very own librarian, Prajwal Pandey.
I yield my chair to the ex-elected member of the Standing Committee, University College.
Order.
Insult and denigration. Insult and denigration to the intelligence of the common man. That is what the proposition has shamefully already tried to do tonight, and we will not stand for it. However, let us begin fairly. Reform has not emerged because Britain is perfectly governed. It has emerged because many people feel ignored, overtaxed, culturally disrespected, and badly served by the state. They look at Westminster and see a political class that is very good at explaining failure, but very bad at preventing it. So the opposition should not sneer at reform voters. They are not extremists. They are simply exhausted. But there is a difference between understanding why people are angry and believing that the angriest party should run the country. That is the central mistake of this motion. It confuses the ability to diagnose national frustration with the ability to govern a complex state. Declined. In a moment. But before I make the opposition case, it falls upon me to introduce our esteemed proposition speakers for tonight. We have just heard from the union's wonderful Director of Press, Benedict Masters. Ben is a third-year law with French student who is supposedly on his year abroad. As our Director of Press this term, why don't we look at some of the headlines Ben has allowed under his tenure? Oxford Union partners with Palestinian group associated with Hamas operative for ball. Oxford Union's race to the bottom. Tommy Robinson debates to go ahead. And my personal favourite, Oxford Union President-elect ousted for faking votes. The union has appeared more in the Telegraph than Trump has appeared in the Epstein files. Great work, Ben. I cannot wait for next week. Up next is Andrew Rosendale, Reform MP for Romford.
Shocking.
Andrew was a Tory party member from the age of 14 until he defected over the Chagos Islands. After defecting, he got locked out of his own constituency office, which is still owned by the local Conservative Association. He then sued and lost, and then had to pay £23,000 in legal fees. I simply can't see how he's arguing that reform is fit for office when he can't even get into his own. Then we have Gwen Towner. When Reform UK entered a period of civil war where one of their most popular figures abandoned them and Elon Musk clowned on Farage on Twitter, Gwen called it suboptimal. If that's Gwen's suboptimal, I can't wait to see what a bad day at the office looks like.
Trust me, I've seen many.
In the penultimate spot, we have Matt Goodwin. World-renowned author and M- connoisseur. If you don't know what I'm talking about, Matt recently came under fire for supposedly using AI to write his new book, an allegation Matt has unequivocally denied. In fairness to Matt, when he incorrectly predicted that Labour wouldn't get at least 38% of the votes in 2017, he followed through on his promise to eat a book by snacking on a page from his own. Speaking of not reaching some 38% of the vote, how did you find your trip up to Gorton and Denton? Hopefully, you'll find further success here tonight. Last but not least, we have a fellow Essex man, Councillor Jamie McIver. Jamie is about as Essex as it gets. He's got slick-backed hair, the perfect white teeth, the turtleneck and blazer combo. He campaigned on a platform of council tax being too high, and then voted to raise it upon taking office. As another former Tory, it's a little bit ironic to see him complaining about immigration when Reform HQ can only be described as a refugee camp for failed conservatives. Madam President, these are your speakers, and they are most welcome. Now, back to the substance of my argument. Reform may be fit to protest. It may be fit to pressure the other major parties. It may be fit to frighten Conservative MPs into suddenly remembering where their constituencies are. But that is not the same as being fit to govern. A party fit to govern must pass 3 tests. It must have the people, the programme, and the temperament for power. Reform fails all 3. First, the people. If Reform wants to govern, Nigel Farage does not need just a good television performance. He needs hundreds of serious MPs, credible ministers, and disciplined councillors, competent advisors, and candidates who can survive more than 10 minutes of public scrutiny. However, Reform has already shown us what happens when its operatives stand tested at a smaller scale. Look at the local council controversies. Look at the candidate scandals. Look at the constant need to suspend, distance, clarify, deny, explain, and pretend that the latest embarrassment is somehow an isolated incident. In October of last year, 4 Reform councillors were suspended after a video was leaked showing the leader of the party's flagship authority, Kent County Council, telling backbench members to effing suck it up.
And they should have done.
Very well. When they dared to question her decisions, Kent was won with 57 of 81 seats, overturning a 30-year Tory majority, and was held by the party as a showcase of its ability to govern. The showcase lasted approximately 3 months before it descended into a very public screaming match. And that was before the 2026 local elections had even taken place. Within days of those elections, at least 4 newly elected Reform UK councillors had already been suspended, expelled, or resigned their seats, with one elected to Sheffield City Council describing himself as an ethno-nationalist and another in Bolton who had previously been expelled from the Conservatives over allegations of racism. If a party cannot reliably control the quality of its candidates before an election, why should we trust it to appoint ministers after one? If this is what happens when the stakes are council seats, what happens when the stakes are the Home Office, the Treasury, national security, or foreign policy? Second, the programme. Reform's great political talent is simplicity. It takes complicated national problems and compresses them into slogans short enough to fit on a leaflet or loud enough to survive a television panel. Cut immigration, cut taxes, cut waste, take back control, fix Britain. Wonderful. Who could possibly object? I too am against waste. I'm also against bad weather and printer jams, but I do not claim that this qualifies me to run the Treasury. Let us take Reform's 2024 manifesto. The Institute for Fiscal Studies found that Reform proposed tax cuts it estimated would cost nearly £90 billion per year, and spending increases of a further £50 billion per year, claiming it would pay for these through £150 billion per year of reductions in other spending. The IFS concluded that the spending reductions would save less than stated, and the tax cuts would cost more than stated by a margin of tens of billions of pounds per year. To fund it all, Reform said it would scrap net zero. The Institute of Fiscal Government, whose own analysis Reform cited in justifying these savings, publicly stated that the party had misrepresented its findings and had failed to acknowledge that most of the investment in question comes from the private sector. In other words, Reform's flagship fiscal plan rested on numbers its own sources cited were wrong. This is not a programme for government. It is a wish list dressed up in a spreadsheet. Third, temperament. A party fit to govern must respect institutions, not merely exploit distrust in them. Reform's entire political energy comes from a story of betrayal. The people betrayed by elites, the nation betrayed by politicians, democracy betrayed by judges, bureaucrats, civil servants, journalists, migrants, experts, and whoever else is useful by Thursday. Some of that anger has roots in reality. Institutions have failed. Governments have broken promises. Voters have been patronized, but there is a difference between reforming institutions and undermining them. A serious reformer says, this institution is failing, so we must work to make it better. A demagogue says, this institution disagrees with me, so it is an enemy of the people. That is the danger. We have seen elsewhere what happens when politics becomes a permanent war against every independent check on power. Courts become obstacles. Journalists become traitors. Civil servants become saboteurs. Opponents become enemies. Elections are respected only when they are won. And that is exactly why this motion must fall. The need for reform is too serious to be entrusted by reform, because reform offers the politics of the shortcut. Simple enemies, simple answers, simple slogans. But Britain's problems are not simple, and the people who suffer from them deserve better than emotional satisfaction. They deserve competence. They deserve a movement that can win attention and show depth, that can mobilize and build trust, that can challenge institutions and prove it would strengthen them. Reform has done none of these things. It has pointed at the ruins and called that leadership. It has turned grievance into theatre and mistaken noise for readiness. So when the proposition tells you reform is popular, remember, popularity is a measure of mood, not fitness for office. When they tell you reform speaks for the ignored, remember, representation is not readiness. When they tell you reform would shake up the system, remember, you can shake a broken machine. That does not mean you know how to repair it. And when they tell you Nigel Farage has changed Britain before, remember, changing history is not the same as governing wisely after it. Reform has earned the right to be heard. It has not earned the right to govern. On people, programme, and temperament, it falls short at every turn. I urge you all to oppose this motion. Thank you.
Thank you for that speech, Prajwal. I now look to the second speaker on proposition, Andrew Rosendale, Reform MP for Romford.
Madam President, honourable members, ladies and gentlemen, what does it mean to be fit to govern? In my view, it means three things. Firstly, the ability to take difficult decisions in the national interest. Secondly, the ability to explain those decisions honestly to the public. And thirdly, and most importantly, the ability to actually carry them out. And I was reminded of a quote from Alexis de Tocqueville by Lord Frost only last week, which goes as follows. The central administration was all powerful in appearance, but when one looked closely, everything demonstrated its impotence. To achieve anything, to carry out the least regulation, took the concurrence of 1,000 wills, which it could neither compel nor persuade. The state wished to do everything and could accomplish almost nothing. Sounds familiar, doesn't it? This is the description of pre-revolutionary France, but it could quite easily be, Madam President, a description translated to 21st century Britain. Here lies the central problem before us tonight. Under Britain's present political system, I ask this House, can anyone truly govern? I would argue that Reform UK is the only party really fit to govern because it actually understands what has gone wrong with the governance of this country itself. In this country, we do not have a system of separated powers, despite Tony Blair's attempts to the contrary. Our political settlement and our constitution rest upon the foundational principles of parliamentary sovereignty. Power in Britain is, in theory, legitimate because it flows through Parliament as its manifestation of the democratic expression of the British people and the British nation, the King in Parliament. Yet, over the last 30 years, power has migrated from Parliament and into the hands of institutions which are either barely accountable or not accountable at all. Even on Conservative estimates, hundreds upon hundreds of quangos now sit between the voter and the decisions that affect our lives. Bodies such as the Climate Change Committee, Ofgem, the Environment Agency, the Food Standards Agency, and goodness knows however many others there are. Countless regulators now exercise an enormous hold over our national policy while remaining insulated from democratic accountability. I give way.
What's wrong with the Food Standards Agency in particular? What do you object to with this government?
I object to the fact that no longer are these outside agencies or quangos accountable directly to elected ministers and members of Parliament. We need to go back to the idea that the people you elect are the people that make decisions and actually govern our country. According to the Taxpayers Alliance in 2025, they are responsible for almost 1/3 of government spending and collectively employ close to 500,000 people, a workforce larger than the population of some major British cities. Likewise, how can the British Parliament be sovereign in any real sense if legislation passed by elected representatives can be frustrated or effectively rewritten through the judicial interpretation of the Blairite monstrosity which is the Supreme Court? In addition, through the Human Rights Act, we have seen sweeping reach of the European Convention on Human Rights into domestic law, an instrument which, in the words of Lord Sumption, has made a claim to legislative powers without boundaries and is therefore contrary to the rule of law and fundamentally undemocratic. We see in the civil service that ministers arrive in office, and Sir Desmond will no doubt confirm this, they arrive in office with a democratic mandate, only to discover that much of the machinery beneath them is culturally resistant, procedurally obstructive, and structurally independent of political direction. The consequences are that ministers lack meaningful control over their own departments. MPs lack any meaningful influence over law and policy, and consequently, voters feel totally ignored. Madam President, this is where reform enters the picture. I spent 7 elections from 2001 onwards telling my constituencies in the great Essex town of Romford that the Conservative Party would not ignore them and that my trust was with the Conservative leadership to be able to put into action the promises that they told the electorate time and time again they would fulfil. But every time a Conservative government would do the opposite, whether out of their own political will or because of the structure of government is such where those with an agenda are blocked from doing anything meaningful. It is for this reason that democratic alienation has become one of the most defining political conditions of modern Britain. Brexit was supposed to address this. Millions voted to restore democratic control, to reassert the principle that laws governing Britain should be made by those accountable to the British people. Yet that process has barely begun. In many respects, it has been made worse. Power has not returned to the public. It has simply been redistributed amongst regulators, permanent secretaries, courts, so-called experts, administrative bodies who are all beyond democratic reach.
A point of information.
I certainly give way.
1 million people in Quangos, 1.5 million employed by the NHS. Are they beyond democratic reach?
Well, the one thing the Labour Party has done is get rid of NHS England, which is a good thing, But in reality, sir, I would say to you this. People vote for members of Parliament to form a government to make decisions. That power has been diminished by successive governments, both Labour, Conservative and coalition. It's time to restore power back to those the people elect. And that is what reform will do when in government and when Nigel Farage becomes our next Prime Minister. And so, the Labour Party built this system. The Conservative Party, especially those who proudly describe themselves as heirs to Blair, preserved and expanded that. The Liberal Democrats and the SNP would take this transfer of authority even further by rejoining the European Union. And the Greens, they're arguing for so-called citizens' assemblies. I must confess I'm not entirely sure what they think the House of Commons is, if not that. And so, Madam President, Reform UK is different because we are in no way interested or invested in defending the current model. We stand alone in asking the more fundamental question of how we make Britain governable again. And my colleague Danny Kruger has been tasked by Reform UK with the very brief of preparing us for government. We have proposed to abolish the Cabinet Office and replace it with a directly accountable office of the Prime Minister. We have proposed to restore authority to departmental ministers rather than diffuse it to permanent secretaries. And we intend on fundamentally reforming and overhauling the civil service so that it is once again serves the elected governments rather than developing priorities of its own. All of these reforms stem from the principle that if a decision affects the British people, it should be traceable to the elected representatives who are answerable at the ballot box. We will not end there. In the spirit of 1660, I believe we need a great repeal act to tear out the damage done by the Constitution by Tony Blair and others to restore the principle that this country is governed by those we elect and answerable to the British people. Now, reform is not flawless. No political party is, and no political party ever will be. The question is, Madam President, is whether Britain can continue to be governed through a system in which power is dispersed to those we cannot see. And importantly, no one can vote out of office, resulting in a total decline in public trust to our democracy. If being fit to govern means restoring parliamentary sovereignty, restoring ministerial executive power, and restoring the voice of the British people, then Reform UK is fit to govern precisely because it recognises that Britain in its current constitutional condition is barely governable at all. It is indeed broken. Ladies and gentlemen, honourable members, if we wish to rescue this country, if we wish to put democracy back in the heart of the governance of the United Kingdom, the only government that can do that is a Reform UK government led by the honourable member for Clacton.
I yield the chair to the Treasurer-elect, Claire Lewis.
I yield the chair to the Chief of Staff, Charlotte Wald.
Thank you for that speech. I now look to the second speaker on opposition, the Honourable Josh Babarinde, Liberal Democrat MP for Eastbourne.
Thank you, Madam President. Lovely people, what an honour it is to be invited here. Reform talk about how they are good at listening, but clearly they are not very good at listening to the bell, sitting through that diatribe that does not prove anything in favour of this motion and summarises exactly why they are unfit to govern. This proposition would have you believe that reform has achieved a political earthquake. But I would suggest that all they have really achieved is a tremor, amplified by a right-wing press that mistakes volume for seismic activity. But let's deal with the central claim in the motion, that reform is a plausible contender for power. Plausible to whom, exactly? The pollsters? Well, maybe. To headline writers? Definitely. But that is about it. Reform's entire... I'll take that.
And how about the voters in the last 2 rounds of local elections?
The voters in the the voters in the last rounds of elections have rejected reform's division in many places across this country.
Can I ask that you give a point of information once responded to, let the speaker speak, and then give another point of information later down the line?
They have rejected reform in many places across this country. The vast majority of voters, when you look at the opinion polls, I think reform are on 30% or so. That is the majority of the country that is rejecting reform. I come back to my point. Reform's entire political identity is built on never having to make one. It's a party that thrives on mugging people of their deepest, darkest fears and weaponizing for the purpose of stirring division with a view to gaining political power without any intention of delivering it effectively for our communities. Now, the Honourable Speaker, Mr. Rosendale, spoke of how reform are very good at listening and very good at understanding. Well, I would posit that the crazy cat lady in The Simpsons understands cats very well, but would I want her as my vet? Is she fit to be my cat's vet? Absolutely not. And in terms of reform's political programme, what we have seen is a series of numbers conjured up on the back of a fag packet that collapse a moment a Year 6 SAT student starts crunching through those numbers. They've said they'll achieve vast savings from abolishing this and defunding that. Where? How? And audited by whom? Well, the honest answer is audited by vibes. And here's the thing about vibes, is vibes don't build hospitals. Vibes don't build houses, and vibes don't fight wars. And look at their own record, where they've actually held power. County councils up and down the country. What have we seen? Resignations, defections, and internal fights that would make WWE look like a meditation retreat. If a party cannot manage a council chamber, without it turning into the Hunger Games? What confidence could we have that they could manage the nuclear codes? The proposers may fob you off by telling you that this is just teething trouble, the normal growing pains of a young party. But reform is not young. It's the Brexit Party with a new coat of paint, which was UKIP with a new coat of paint, which was Nigel Farage with many, many more coats of paint. This is not a movement in its infancy. It's a movement that has had, being generous, a decade to generate an actual policy platform and has instead spent that decade developing grievances, which is a different skill entirely. But we do know something that Reform are passionate about. Injustice, so says Zia Youssef. Mr. Youssef recently took to social media to declare that politicians responsible for what he called the burning injustice of modern Britain are traitors to their country. And this begs the obvious question. Who exactly is he talking about? Is it the former Conservative Home Secretary, Suella Braverman, now a Reform MP, who before overseeing a surge in immigration admitted that she could not get the pride flag removed from the top of her own Whitehall building? And happy Pride Month, one and all. Was Mr. Youssef talking about the former Culture Secretary, now Reform politician Nadine Dorries, who is now actively campaigning to scrap the Online Safety Act that she created? Or is it former Housing Secretary Robert Jenrick, now Reform Shadow Chancellor, who didn't find the time to build the housing our country needs, but did find the time to save a party donor £45 million? Or was it James McMurdoch, the man done for abusing his ex-girlfriend, who they got elected as a member of Parliament? They claim to talk the talk when it comes to tackling violence against women and girls, but they do not walk the walk, and that is an utterly serious point. But maybe Mr. Youssef was talking about Nigel Farage himself, who, when Donald Trump demeaned the deaths, the sacrifices of those British troops who died in Afghanistan, failed to come down on those comments like a ton of bricks because he was too scared of upsetting his BFF in the White House. A man who wouldn't declare this $5 million gift from Christopher Harbon, a man who built his entire career on taking back control, but who cannot be honest about who controls him. This is a professional grifter leading a D-tier list of MPs. Fitness to oppose is not fitness to govern. And this is a house that should know the difference. So when the proposition asks whether reform represents an earthquake, I would say only in the sense that earthquakes are loud, sudden, and leave behind a mess that someone else has got to clear up. The someone else, historically, have been the grown-ups, the people who understand that running a country means turning up on the bad days too, and not just doing a victory lap on the good ones. Our country is better than that. Our country is better than division. Our country is better than hate. Our country is great. And so I urge this House, please do not mistake the noise of an earthquake for the architecture of a government. Please oppose this motion.
Can I remind all members that they are voting with their feet? Depending on the side of the door that you walk through, that is a vote cast. Can I please ask for silence in the House? Thank you very much for that speech. I now look to the third speaker on proposition, Gwaine Towler.
Madam President, honourable members, the motion before us asks whether reform is fit to govern. I rise to say that it is, and I do so, I confess, with the considerable advantage of looking across the floor at the alternative. I'm just as bad as I felt like you can ask me the same question. Thank you. Yes, indeed, whatever.
Fit to govern, eh?
Yes, indeed. Okay. For arrayed against me tonight is the most distinguished coalition, the serried ranks of the was and the never shall be. To one side, the parties of the past who governed and were found wanting. To the other, a party of the future that obstinately declines to arrive. Between them, they possess a great deal of experience, most of it of failing our country. Take Mr. Babrindia, a thoroughly decent man. An OBE, no less, who has done genuinely good getting young offenders out of crime and into work. I salute him for it. He now enjoys the high honour of presiding over the Liberal Democrats, and I salute him for that as well. Much as one salutes a man who volunteers to conduct the string quartet on the Titanic. For his is the party of Ed Davey, the great statesman of the paddleboard and the bungee rope, whose entire policy programme, as far as the naked eye can detect, consists of a deep and abiding loathing of three things: Donald Trump, Nigel Farage, and the social media giants. On that last point, I do wonder whether Sir Ed has thought it apposite to telephone Sir Nick Clegg, late of his parish, and latterly of Meta, who made a very handsome fortune indeed from precisely the sort of giant his old party now professes to despise. Perhaps the hatred is sincere. Perhaps it is merely that the rest of them were never offered a job. Then, to Miss Millward, Deputy Leader of the Green Party and daughter of St Hugh's, so welcome home. Nobody doubts your sincerity or your party's, and there is something admirable in a movement that means every word it says. Hers is a party with one particular gift. It can pronounce billions and billionaires and millionaires in any order you please, at length and with magnificent conviction. I only wish, and I wish it fondly, that when one puts the two unglamorous questions, how should we defend this realm, and how should we pay for the economy that funds for all the kindness, the answer came back with the same confidence. It's a lovely, lovely thing to want to put the world right. It's a harder thing and a less applauded one to keep the lights on when you do it. And Mr. Blackford, I'm generally glad to see a man of real presence and courtesy who led your party at Westminster with more dignity than the role usually allows. His is the one party on the bench, well, I don't count the last 15 years, but that has actually governed. up in Edinburgh, and I shall be a gentleman draw the lightest of veils over the recent unpleasantness. The £400,000, the 100,000 motorhome that never turned a wheel, the salt and pepper grinders deserving more than a term's rent. I mention it only in passing and with sorrow. My one prayer, offered in the friendliest spirit, is that whatever the next election brings, we are spared the sight of them holding the cruets in a Westminster coalition. Sir Desmond, I approach with nothing but affection. He is a decent man, and Parliament does not overflow with them. He is one of the last true characters of that House, a backbencher of great verve, and shall we say, a certain biblious brio.
He's quite right.
Who has rescued. And I am quite right, and you agree with me on that, and I no doubt you agree with me on the entire motion, but that's very kind. I note only, and I note it Tedley, that for all the splendid noise of his rebellions, when the division bell rings, he could seldom quite bring himself to vote against his own. However richly it deserved it, the spirit was willing, the whip was willinger. And Labour, well, one can't really blame them for not being here. They probably haven't been invited, but why would you? They are tremendously busy right now. Busy enough this week, this very day. 2 defence ministers gone in a day. It's good, isn't it? This very week, to look at the student loan settlement, they decided they have frozen it again onto their generation. The threshold pinned in place until 2030, while your wages climb to meet it. Well, they won't. This is just about right for them. A party that fights like ferrets in the sack and campaigns with touching dedication for its own assassin. We shall let them rest. And here, Mr. President, or Mrs. President, sorry, Madam President, is what I call ought to trouble the benches opposite. Even the pollsters have noticed. Luke Trill, an Oxford man, and himself no stranger to this room, sits through focus group after focus group and reports that the vote for reform has quietly ceased to be the roll of a dice that it might once have been. For more and more ordinary people weighing up that lot, it has become a safer bet on the table than those who have come before it. The risk has been taken out of voting for reform because of what has been done to this country by those who have governed it hitherto. People are no longer frightened of voting reform because that's the option. So, fit to govern. Them, or perhaps us. But take the question seriously, because it deserves to be so. What does it actually mean to be fit to govern? It is not, I think, what the managerial mind supposes. It is not a glossy CV, not a safe pair of hands, not a tidy communications grid. Strip away the cant and ask the question. The common Englishman and our Scots, our Welsh and our Ulstermen, for forgive me, the shorthand, for the inheritance of theirs every much as it is of ours. The question has always been put plainly to anyone who would rule him, what is government actually for? The answer is older than any party in this room, older than the union, this union, the union itself. It is to defend the realm. It is to keep the peace. It is to hold the law level over the head of the richest man and the poorest alike. And then, having done those few hard things well, leave us to our liberty and our property, and get out of the way. That is the whole of it. That is the inheritance of the common law, the law that stood here before Parliament and would stand here afterward. The law of William Blackstone, Oxford's own, looked down out of the air and set in order that every man and woman in these islands might know their rights. Measured against that standard, fitness to govern is not a question of experience, as you suggested. It is a question of spine. And that is precisely where the parties opposite fail, and reform does not. So,
to that end, do you think that reform has spine?
Yes. Thank you. No, damn it, I'm leaving now, sorry. And that is precisely where the parties opposite fail and reform does not. For fitness, properly understood, is the willingness to say what you want and mean it, and to bring with you a team ready to put its shoulder to the national wheel and push. Yes.
Do you think that all of those Conservative MPs who are now Reform MPs said what they meant when they wanted to, when they were Conservative?
No, but you should see them breathe freely now. You should see them breathe. I tell you what, When 25 years ago, when I left the Tory party and joined then was UKIP, it felt like this. It felt like you climb up to the top of a hill, a mountain, you see this stunning view. It's a beautiful view. And then you take your rucksack off. And that's what it was like. The view didn't change, but by gum, I felt better about myself for it. But anyhow, I go back, the team that is willing to put its shoulder to the wheel and push. And what a team it is. Consider for a moment what is actually stepping forward. Nearly 1,600 candidates have put themselves forward at the last count. And the striking thing about almost every, not all, but almost every one of them, is that they have no wish to be politicians at all. They have good lives. Yes?
Is that why so many of your councillors, when elected, don't go to meetings, don't understand the job?
I dispute that. I dispute that. And Rachel, I dispute that, but hold on, let me answer. I dispute that, but I think that's going to be carried by one of our councillors who's going to be speaking later. I will talk to that point.
Councillors went from 57
Point of order.
to 8.
It's not meant to, points of information cannot be backs and forths between different speakers.
I believe it was the sound of the applause that prevented the question from being asked, but thank you.
As I say, I believe that one of the following speakers will be covering that area. But frankly, the fact that the Kent Council did have their issues, they did, but have succeeded in saving over 100 million without reducing services this year is not a bad start. And those people who had the chance to vote for councillors in Kent this year, despite all those troubles, continue to vote for reform. So, hey, I'll leave it to the locals. But anyhow, I go back. We have 1,600 people who have applied to be candidates for Westminster. And I would say that they have good lives. They have lives that function perfectly well without the abuse, without the hassle, without the ruin of evening's peace, and without having to come to a place like this. They are not careerists. They're not on the make. They have run things and built things and met a payroll, and every one of them could be doing something far easier and far better with their lives than to standing for Parliament. So why do they stand? You remember the answer Mallory gave when they asked him why on earth he wished to climb Mount Everest. Because it is there. These men and women would put it more soberly and more plainly. Because it has to be done. I have no choice. I must do this. Because saving these islands of ours is not a career but a vocation. And someone in the end must answer it. That is the body of people, untainted by the stench of declinism, unhamstrung by the mouldy little compromise that eaten into the heart of almost everyone sitting opposite. To clean those Augean stables takes a good deal more than good intentions. It takes purpose, a set of common beliefs, what Gordon Brown in one of his better moments might have called an irreducible core. Reform has that core. The benches across from me mislaid theirs many years ago. That, in the end, is the whole of the difference. The parties on the other side of this House have made their peace with the decline of this country. They administer it, they manage it. One or two of them, I suspect, rather have gone fond of it. Reform will not and has not, and the signal refusal is worth more than all their experience combined. So let me put it as plainly as I can and answer honestly. Are we perfect? Good Lord, no. Of course we're not. Show me a cohort of men and women who are perfect in any walk of life. But are we fit? Fit in ourselves, fit against the alternative this House has listened to. I say we are fit as a body of people as these islands have sent towards in decades, set against the serried ranks of that which was, and that should never will be. The only answer to this motion is yes. So I beg you to support this motion. Thank you.
Might I remind all members that they are voting with their feet. The side of the door that you walk through is a vote cast. Many thanks for that speech, Mr. Towler. I now call upon the third speaker on proposition, the Right Honourable Ian Blackford, former leader of the Scottish National Party.
Thank you, Madam President. Ladies and gentlemen, honourable and right honourable members. I think it is true to say that there is a crisis in our democracy. And if I can put it in this way, a burning platform with the erosion of trust in the appeal of the mainstream parties and a failure of leadership to deliver prosperity to many of our citizens since the financial crisis of 2008. Declining real living standards over much of this period and the cost of living crisis leads to despair for many. Well, the government over that period has been either the Labour Party or the Conservative Party. And it's actually one of the reasons, since you make that point of information, why I want Scotland to exit this union. Because I want the prosperity that an independent Scotland would deliver for our people. I do understand that in this vacuum of leadership in these islands over the last 20 years, that space has opened up, quite frankly, for charlatans and chancers to develop simplistic solutions as part of their playbook to scapegoat groups within our society and to divide our communities. And I bear no ill will to the erudite speeches from the individuals that we have heard from, but we need to be real about the prospect that we face with reform. Those of us in the other parties, and my goodness, we're lined up today, parties that typically don't work together. But we do that because we must call out the divisive rhetoric from those that seek to achieve the office of government for reform. And let's remember that they are influenced and encouraged by a Trumpian agenda. There are, friends, many reasons as to why reform are not fit for government, but not least the response of Nigel Farage to the conviction of the murderer of Henry Novak. In raising the murder of Henry, we should all stand with his family. But let's remind ourselves of the words of Mark Novak, the father of Henry. We want to see Henry's heartbreaking story to make change for the better. We do not want his death to be used to create further division, hatred, or tension. We want his story to help make our streets safer for everyone. Nigel Farage was not listening to Mark Novak. Farage called for the British people to show pure, cold rage. Friends, the response to that call was the somewhat predictable riots that took place in Southampton that evening.
Are the rioters themselves not responsible for their horrendous behaviour? How is Nigel Farage at all responsible?
My goodness, my friend, if you cannot see when you call for pure, cold rage that there's going to be a response, then quite frankly, by that alone, and by that alone, Farage and reform are not fit for government.
Order! Can we please have order in the chamber?
If I contrast the effect of the incitement to riot, because that's what it was, of the language used by Nigel Farage, what we have seen across the rest of the political divide, all of us, has been a desire to support the Novak family and, yes, to examine what did take place on that tragic evening, and at pace to learn whatever lessons need to be learned. That is what political leaders do. Support the victims, to learn the lessons, and yes, to seek to provide answers. Not as Nigel Farage did, to take a flamethrower to the scene of the crime and inflame the situation. But then, let us look at what has happened this week and the shocking attack in Belfast on Monday evening that we all rightly condemn. And I despair, because once again, Nigel Farage and others in Reform called on folk to protest. You cannot call on people to protest and then wash your hands on the racist thuggery that took place in Northern Ireland.
Order.
As a point of information, did not the family of Mr. Ogilvy, who was attacked in the streets in Belfast, call for peaceful protests?
What happened?
So did they call for protests?
What
And
happened?
calling for
Can you
protests,
please
say
happen?
something else.
What
Please ask your
happened
question and then
to
allow the
that
speaker to
individual
respond.
is shameful and should be called out. But what we saw on Tuesday evening was families being forced out of their homes because of the colour of their skin. And that is on the back of Nigel Farage calling for protest.
All forms of racism are wrong, but that does not mean that people don't have the right to be enraged when their own citizens are killed by foreigners in their country.
You know, you can try and excuse what took place. But when you see people being forced out of their homes, when you see people that work in our health service, and I listened to the RCN talk about the fact that our medical professionals in Northern Ireland were being stopped in the streets by thugs and asked what country they came from, based on nothing else than the colour of their skin. And that division, that hatred, is stoked up by the party of Reform. Friends, they are simply not fit for government. If we take current polling and electoral experience, particularly in by-elections, it can be argued that the public are demonstrating that Reform are not fit for government. If I take, for example, the Caerphilly by-election, Reform gave us the impression that they were going to win this seat. They did not come close. Plaid Cymru won with a vote. They came very close. Listen, can I remind you, Sunshine, Plaid Cymru won with a vote share of 47.4%, nearly 50% of the vote. And in doing so, demonstrated that they led a progressive alliance to lock out Reform. That is exactly what happened in the Senate election a few weeks ago, when a resurgent Plaid put together that progressive alliance. Reform were stopped in their tracks, the triumph of hope over division. In the Gorton and Denton by-election, it was the same result. Reform defeat, although in this time it's the Greens who were in the best place to win that seat. In Scotland, my party, the SNP, have been specific about the desire and the need to lock Reform out of government and have appealed to every other mainstream party to join us in locking them out. Despite repeated claims that Reform, that they were going to storm the Scottish citadel, they failed to take a single seat, not one, first past the post, and received 16% of the vote, considerably less than Reform are polling in England and Wales. And I would argue an indication of the success that we have had, because quite simply we've taken Reform on head on. Our First Minister has made it clear that whilst other parties were invited to talk with the SNP government, no such invitation would be made to Reform. In Scotland, we're standing up to Reform, and we're showing in doing so that they can and they will be defeated. The question therefore becomes not just about being fit to govern, but locking them out of government. If I may ask a question to my friends in the Conservatives, will they make it clear that never, not ever, would they be prepared to go into government with Reform? All of us represent mainstream civic society. Reform are a threat to that civic society and the values that we hold dear. I could go on, but I hear the bell. I'll stop for now. I plead all of you for sanity, for civility. Make sure tonight that you oppose this motion and that we defeat in this chamber reform, and we show that willingness of all of us in these islands to stand together against division and against fear. Thank you.
Now we will take a brief pause to open up the floor to floor speeches. I look for a speaker on proposition. I call upon Alex Cohen.
I promise I'm a member. Thank you, Madam President. Recognize the irony that you have a Canadian Liberal here standing up and making the case for why reform is fit to govern, but there's actually a lot to learn from Canada here. We already had our own Reform Party in the 1990s, so in this case, the colony is ahead of the motherland. Reform burst onto the scene, marginalized our Conservative Party, pushed them to the right, and eventually merged with them in an act that Nigel Farage called himself a reverse takeover, so don't be shocked if he leads the Tories one day. I wouldn't be. But tonight we're here to talk about reform governing. So as a foreigner, as an outsider, I've taken a close look at the political parties here. And after an exhaustive analysis of the people and personalities that have run this country, I can tell you that reform is very much fit to govern. Let's talk about party unity. Despite only having a few politicians at the national level, reform, they all seem to already all hate each other. You saw Rupert Lowe, in a fit of pique, go to found his own party for those who would like to restore Britain to a time when it was all white. We've seen two of the reform's top dogs, Robert Jenrick and Zia Youssef, publicly squabble over deportation policy. I think one of the speakers here on the proposition was actually fired by Zia Youssef at some point and then brought back by the Reform Party membership.
Fourth time of firing, proud of it.
Congratulations. This is great news. Britain has a time-honored tradition of parties knifing each other. Conservatives had 5 leaders in what? Was that 8 years? The Labour are already ousting their leader after only 2 years in power. Reform is well on its way to being in the big leagues. They are ready to take the reins from each other first. When it comes to unity, reform is fit to govern. Next, let's talk about transparency. Nigel Farage hasn't given a press conference in, I think, something like 50 days. This is great news. The more you have to hide, took 50 days. It took 50. And this is shocking from a man who never met a microphone he didn't like. I mean, now this again is great news for Britain. Labour would like to spellbound all of us into forgetting that they appointed Peter Mandelson to Washington after they knew that he crashed on the couch of his buddy Jeff Epstein. I would like to forget that Peter Mandelson almost became the chancellor of this university, but that's a whole other story. The Tories are no slouch either. When they were in government, they used WhatsApp, they used private emails, they had all those parties during COVID. Reform is well on its way. The more you have to hide. When it comes to transparency, reform is fit to govern. Let's talk about integrity. This House will know that Nigel Farage, it's been already mentioned, took £5 million from a crypto bro. Of course, this was a donation from a friend because billionaires always donate to people, politicians, because they think they're cool guys. Again, I think this is a great sign. This country has a long history of paying politicians. You know, Winston Churchill in the 1920s took 5,000 quid from 2 oil companies that wanted to merge. I'll forgive him, he won World War II, and I'm Jewish. In the years since, there have been so many cash for access scandals that if you go on Wikipedia and you look up cash for access, you have to specify not just the politician, but the year, because there are so many. We saw it under Blair, Tony's cronies.
The honourable member said earlier that somebody from The Simpsons, a cat lady, would be qualified to be a vet. Is your argument that reform is the Mayor Quimby of British politics?
I think I would say so. Cash for access, a time-honored tradition of British politics. Reform is ready to take the reins after they take a check. Now, lastly, consistency. Reform promised, I believe a few years ago, £90 billion in tax cuts. Now, this was welcomed by many here. This is an expensive country. As a foreigner, I consider it an assault on the wallet leaving the house. They promptly broke the promise. This, again, is in a time-honored tradition of British politics. We know that the path to power lies around the bend of many stomach-churning U-turns. Keir Starmer ran for the leadership as a left-winger, ran in the general as a moderate, ran the country as I don't know what, and is now running away from his promises quicker than our members are going to run away from the hacks outside the union tomorrow. Now, the Conservatives are no slouch either. We know that zombies roam their graveyard of broken promises, from 300,000 new homes to stopping the boats. Boats are still coming. When it comes to consistency, Reform are fit to govern. Now, I could go on. I could do the whole Nigel Farage man of the people shtick, although he does have some drip. I will give him that. He's a great dresser. But it's a floor speech and time is limited. But I have to say, on unity, on consistency, on transparency, and on integrity, Reform is fit to govern, just like every other party that's run this country. Thank you.
Thank you for that speech. Thank you for that speech. I now look for a slightly shorter speech on side opposition. I look to Jake Dibden.
Thank you, Orwa. Darling, I trust you know my name, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. If you're confused, look at the tenancy agreement. As a literally card-carrying member of the Conservative Party, it's very unusual that I find myself in agreement with a Liberal Democrat. It's even... What can I say? They make for very romantic partners in rose gardens. It's even less unusual that I find myself agreeing with a member of the SNP. I'm sorry, Miss Millwood, I'm not sure I'm going to be able to push myself to agreement with the Green. I think what I want to share with the House today is that there are two ways in which Reform is not fit to govern. Firstly, that Reform UK's platform is not a viable programme for government, certainly not one that is in the interests of the members of this House. And secondly, that Reform is not fit for government because Reform itself is ungovernable. I'm going to deal with the first, and you'll notice I very helpfully labelled the numbers of my pages so I don't make the cock-up of the two speakers or have anywhere near as rough an outing as Mr. Masters did. Now, dealing with only two elements of Reform's platform, firstly, let's interrogate possibly one of the most important functions of a government, foreign policy. I had the pleasure last term, some of you will remember, of asking Layla Cunningham, when she came to talk about Winston Churchill, about Nigel Farage's previous comments on the Russo-Ukrainian war, which verbatim include that there must be concessions on both sides in order to bring the war into the end, and that that Ukraine essentially baited Russia into invading. And the way she dealt with this was to simply deny it and to lie that I hadn't seen those exact words come out of Mr. Farage's mouth in a clip I watched a couple of hours before. Elsewhere, when we examine their plans for the budget, what we encounter is purely a product of populism targeted towards those over the age of 50 at the cost of everyone in this room. No, thank you, Mr. Balbus. Apologies. In the first instance, we see a commitment from Reform to maintain the triple lock in a moment in this country's financial history when we should be looking to gut it. No, thank you, Mr. Lawson. If you want more on why we must scrap this dreadfully regressive policy, I direct you towards two fantastic blogs recently written by Mr. Swain. Elsewhere, if we look at their 2024 manifesto, they committed themselves to £141 billion of new spending in tax cuts or additional social expenditure, almost 13 times higher than was promised by this disastrous Labour government, and 3 times higher than the abortive mini-budget proposed by Liz Truss and Kwasi Kwarteng. And how do they plan to fund this? Through cuts and efficiencies. And if this sounds familiar, it's precisely because it is simply a reheated version of Reform's plan in local government, which led them to U-turn on promises not to increase council tax because, funnily enough, the billions of pounds of DEI and climate efficiencies they thought they'd be able to find just weren't there. Frankly, what Reform offers us as a plan for the country is something that will destroy the value of existing financial investments, including pensions and housing savings, that will send the pound tumbling, thereby increasing the cost of living. If you are a young person, you can kiss any financial aspirations in your life goodbye under a Reform government. In order to make time, I'm going to unfortunately have to skip the skewering of the dramatis personae that I had written with great theatrical aplomb. Don't worry, I'll see you all in President's Drinks after. I'll give it there. And indeed, I'm going to leave you with this thought. Reform, in many ways, remind me of a band of political adventurers and swashbuckling scoundrels. They are, in many ways, like 17th century pirates. They may be charismatic. They may be fun on the lash, particularly over dinner. But my only question for the House is, would you give them the keys to the Treasury? I'm going to ask you all to vote for the noes, and I'm going to let Arwa crack on with tonight's fantastic debate.
Can I remind all students that they are voting with their feet? Depending on the side of the door they go through, that is a vote cast.
Yeah, I know. Do you miss it?
I now look to Matt Goodwin to continue the case on side proposition.
Wow. Madam President, ladies and gentlemen, the motion before us tonight is not actually about Reform UK and Nigel Farage. It is actually about Britain, and it is about what the political class in this country, lined up before us over here, have done to this country over the last 30 years. Time and time again, we are told, and we've heard it tonight, that Reform UK is not possibly fit to govern because we don't have the experience, we're not competent, we're rabble-rousers and pirates and swashbuckling drinkers. All of that is true. But we are not a serious political party. That is what we have heard so far this evening. But if all of those things are needed to govern this country effectively, then what on earth has been happening for the last 30 years? Just look at the people who are in front of me tonight. The Lib Dems, led by Ed Davey, a man that projects apparent seriousness. The SNP, that wants independence so that it can shackle Scotland to the European Union, which is not a democratic organisation. The Greens who talk about people being divisive, who have just mainstreamed in this country a virulent anti-Semitism and an Islamism and a misogyny that would treat women and girls in this country like second-class citizens. And the Tories, the traditional custodians of this country, who were so committed to this country that under Boris Johnson, they even removed the requirement for companies in this country to advertise jobs in Britain before advertising them overseas. They are not conservatives, they are globalists, and there is a difference between those two things. Many of the people who talk about experience and competence went to the best universities in the world, like this one. 7 of the last 10 prime ministers that we had in this country studied at Oxford. Many of them probably sat in this room. But all of them have presided over a political consensus that has given us 0 economic growth, declining productivity, soaring youth unemployment, which everyone in this room will soon encounter, collapsing public services, not enough prisons, 2-tier policing, broken borders.
If I make an argument and then someone says, oh, here's a critique of it, and I say, oh, but your argument's rubbish as well, does that mean that my argument has suddenly been fixed?
Well, let me come to your point. Broken borders, the highest industrial electricity prices in the Western world, the highest tax burden in this country in peacetime, the mainstreaming of anti-white racism, sectarianism, the grooming gangs, which were left unchecked in this country for 50 years. Their legacy is reflected in collapsing public confidence and trust in politics. They have weakened our democracy.
Did you not allege that family voting and election fraud was happening at the Portland by-election, which was then not proved by the magistrates?
That is factually incorrect. An independent report by Democracy Volunteers on the night of the election, supported by the Electoral Commission, found that in 68% of all polling stations in Gorton and Denton, there was illegal family voting. And I would point, sir, to the fact that Greater Manchester Police have just arrested activists in Gorton and Denton for electoral fraud. There is only one political party in this country that is serious about sectarianism and tackling it, and that is Reform UK. If experience is the thing that you're looking for, then I would suggest to you that the experience we have in Westminster is destroying our country. What I would argue is that Reform UK is the only political party that understands the importance of 2 things that make a political party fit to govern, both of which are currently missing in Westminster. The first is national preference. The idea going back to ancient Rome that nation-states will not survive if they do not prioritise their own law-abiding, tax-paying, hard-working citizens. Not international organisations, not supranational institutions, not unelected, unaccountable public bodies, lawyers, courts, foreign activists, Davos, the World Economic Forum, their own people. We hear tonight a lot about Reform UK being divisive. Let me be absolutely clear. There is nothing more divisive than treating your own people like second-class citizens. There is nothing more divisive than allowing the industrial scale sexual assault and rape of young women in this country for 30, 40 years and then turning a blind eye because it's too difficult to consider that issue. It's politically unfashionable.
Isn't it strange when you attack other political parties, which are membership organisations, which we can all influence, and yet the reality is Reform is the only one which is not a normal political party. It's a private company controlled by Nigel Farage.
This firstly has absolutely nothing to do with what I've just said. We have more than 200,000 grassroots members who will be meeting at our conference in September, and I look forward to the SNP conference in the autumn, when I'm sure they'll have lots of questions about the lack of democracy within the SNP and the embezzlement of party funds. But let me move on. What is divisive in this country is not Reform UK. What is divisive is what we saw on the streets of Belfast. What is divisive is the treatment of Henry Novak. What is divisive is the mainstreaming of anti-white racism in our schools, our universities, and our police force. And what is divisive is waking up week after week, day after day, reading stories about how our own people are being treated like second-class citizens. Reform UK is a symptom of the fact that the British people have had enough of being treated like second-class citizens. We have a serious policy programme. We will end all non-essential migration. We will end low-wage, low-skill migration that has been shown by the Office for Budget Responsibility to be a net fiscal cost. We will leave the European Convention on Human Rights so we can control our laws and our borders. We will end welfare benefits for people who are not British. We will end social housing subsidies for people who are not British. How is it right in this country that we have 1.3 million families on the social housing register, 3,300 military veterans waiting for a house, and the First Lady of Sierra Leone, who lives in a presidential mansion in Freetown, is renting out a council flat in Southwark? How is it right that these governments allowed senior lieutenants in Hamas to have council flats in our country? It is an absolute disgrace. That is, I'm afraid that's incorrect. We have a principle, read the Reform Party manifesto, we have a principle of national preference in housing, sir, which means if you're from this country, if you contribute to this country, if your ancestors built this country, you will be prioritised. You laugh while mainstreaming Islamist sectarianism in this country. You laugh while mainstreaming people who hate our country. You laugh while allowing misogyny and terrorist sympathisers in our country. It is an absolute disgrace. We will prioritise British people in the housing market. And we hear much about the family of Henry Novak. We hear much about what they asked for. We've heard nothing about what the family of Rhiannon White has asked for. Siobhan White, who was asked to meet with the Prime Minister, has asked to meet with Kemi Badenoch. What does Siobhan White want after her daughter was stabbed in the head 19 times by an illegal migrant from Sudan? What has Siobhan asked for? An end to broken borders. She's asked for control at the borders. She's asked for British people, British women, British girls to be protected. I have not heard a single politician in Westminster mention Rhiannon White. I've not heard them mention Thomas Roberts, Wayne Broadhurst, Terence Carney, Lucy Lowe, Victoria Agoglia, Charlene Downs. I could go on and on and on, because if you are part of the hard-working, law-abiding British majority, you simply are not treated with the same degree of respect and decency as other people.
It's a very simple question. This has come up with her yesterday. It's our people, British people, all of these examples. Can you just define what you mean by that?
UK nationals. UK nationals. Somebody like Rhiannon White, who was murdered by an illegal migrant from Sudan who should not have been in this country. Somebody like the man we saw lying on the street in Belfast, who has had life-changing injuries because of an illegal migrant from Sudan. Reform UK's policy on indefinite leave to remain is clear. We will abolish indefinite leave to remain. We will allow people to come to Britain, but they must speak our English language to a high standard. They must make a strong economic contribution to this country. They must have a clean criminal record. These are the foundations of a functioning nation state. And I would say to you, if you're on the left of politics, if you do not have those things, how on earth do you expect people to support the welfare state over the longer term? Nobody in this country will support the welfare state. Nobody in this country will support the social contract if their money, their tax-paying money, is going to people who they do not know and who are destroying their country. What we need in Britain is a new consensus. Reform UK is the only party that actually has the courage to stand up and point out the glaring failures in the existing system. So I would urge you, respecting the time in the debate, to support the motion. Reform UK is fit to govern, because if we don't govern, then goodness knows where Britain will end up. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that speech. I now look to the fourth speaker on opposition, the Right Honourable Sir Desmond Swayne.
Madam President and comrades, it was John Stuart Mill, that great exponent of liberty, who first described the Conservative Party as the stupid party. He then sought to point out that he didn't mean that Conservatives were generally stupid, merely that stupid people were generally conservative. I think, in any walk of life, there will be a measure of stupid people assigned to every political party. In preparation for this debate, however, my researcher handed me a sheaf of the outpourings on social media of any number of Reform candidates at the May elections, with which I could detain or horrify you for the remainder of the time allowed to me, including that one that was elected and pointed out that he believed that a certain nationality should be melted down and the residue used to fill potholes. Well, we've all said something stupid at one time or another, and some of us have said things that are wicked. But the reality is this. The membership of Reform, and I refer to the membership of the voters and supporters, the membership of Reform is overwhelmingly driven by disappointment and frustration at the performance of the Conservative Party, and in particular the last Conservative government.
Point of order.
That is evident from the number of ex-Conservative MPs that now occupy their benches in the House of Commons, and the number of failed Conservative candidates at the last election joined them. I give way.
Do you think Reform could be fit to govern at some point in the future?
Sir Desmond, can I ask you to... Oh, gosh, he's got off. So, could I ask you to speak directly into the microphone so you can pick up your voice?
Very good.
Brilliant, thank you.
Not in my estimation, comrade. So, I share and understand that disappointment and frustration. I voted for Robert Jenrick to be leader of the Conservative Party at the last leadership election, and the one before that, I voted for Suella Braverman. But what they need to understand is when they, and Andrew with them, decamped to Reform, the entire lunatic fringe of the Conservative Party decamped with them. That's why I'm no longer continually embarrassed by the musings on social media of some Conservative councillor or candidate. The reality is they've all found a new home. That's what... Do you want to give way? The reality is this. Suella and the others need not worry, however, about the absurdity of those opinions any more than they need worry about any opinions that they might express of their own. Because there is only one opinion that counts in the Reform Party, and that is the opinion of Nigel Farage. And whatever ambition drove honourable members to depart from the Conservative Party and join their benches, they will need to bend the knee and worship at the shrine of Nigel Farage. It is a one-man band. Now, given the nature of the egos that inhabit political parties, clearly there has to be some sort of glue that holds them together, be it a coherent body of ideas, a great joint endeavour, a philosophy, even an ideology. Now, the Labour Party has, of course, the great history of the working class movement and the unions. They've got socialism. I would suggest that they owe more to Methodism. The nationalists have the dream of being once again a great, wholly independent nation. The Liberal Democrats, at least, are held together by a mystical belief in the power of the bar chart. The Conservative Party inherited the entire Whig tradition. Indeed, many people would say Maggie was much more of a Whig than she was a Tory. At the same time, they merged with the Liberal Unionists, the National Liberals. They hold together with some tension the Tory preoccupation with order and tradition, whilst at the same time with the classical liberal free markets, even libertarianism. The Greens have a great cause, intelligence, and if I may say, beauty. And what holds together the Reform Party? Rage is not enough. Neither is the often restated ambition of Nigel Farage to destroy and replace the Conservative Party. The moment they got into Parliament, they already split, and Rupert went off with his Restore Party. And that split will deny reform the one service that they might have delivered to the nation, namely, next week, denying us the misery of a premiership from the Mayor of Manchester. Now, point of information, very good.
And is it not even worse that he is a town, a Cambridge man? Oh.
Sacre bleu, he's quite right. Given that the judgment of one man is the principal driver of what reform will do, let us just question that judgment. Ladies and gentlemen, comrades, I draw your attention to the most egregious statement by Donald Trump when he was caught on camera expressing the power of his sexual pulling power. And forgive me, Madam Deputy Speaker, but Madam President, Madam President, but I must quote verbatim. Donald Trump, I just can't start kissing them. I don't even wait. When you're a star, you can do anything. Grab them by the pussy. Now, any of the MAGA aficionados at that time quite rightly kept their heads below the parapet. But Not one British politician stepped forward to defend his friend, Nigel Farage. I quote, "It's the kind of thing, if we are being honest, that men do. They sit around, have a drink, and they talk like this." And he went on and said that women do so as well. I'm sure you do not, Madam. Madam President. I'm confident that this House doesn't, and I expect them to show that they don't in the voting this evening.
Can I remind all members that they are voting with their feet? Thank you very much for that, Sir Desmond. I now look to Jamie McIver to close the case for proposition.
Madam President, ladies and gentlemen, well, the state of British politics, and yes, I do look to this side of the House, fitness to govern. I'm afraid for honourable speakers opposite, the British people have already answered the question. And they have said yes. And they have said yes because Reform UK is already in government. You see, I'm not surprised the members opposite haven't mentioned that, because of course their record in local government is so embarrassing they wouldn't dream to mention it. But I will say, both the Liberal Democrats and the Conservatives are exceptional in local government. They are exceptional at leaving councils in exceptional financial support and difficulty. And indeed, it is thanks to reform councils that many more councils will not suffer that fate. But I do have to ask the question about fitness. You see, fitness can mean one of two things. It might mean your ability to do well in the gym, or it might indeed mean your ability to find the perfect fit. And I don't mean in a romantic way, I mean maybe when you're in IKEA. You see, you need to find that unit that fits perfectly. Don't worry about the old furniture in a house, just turn a blind eye to that. Find the unit that fits. But the problem for the members opposite and the parties opposite is the British people aren't looking for a fit. They are looking for a fix. The entire country needs to be fixed. And the only way you do that with a home is to completely renovate it. And that's what we will do. And that's what a reform government will look like, just like we are doing in local government. And it will start with the basics, being house proud, just like we are doing with our civic duties in local government. Civic pride. It starts with the flags that fly. I'll give way shortly. It starts with the flags that fly from reform town halls. Only the English flag, the county flags, and the flag of the United Kingdom. No divisive flags fly from our council. I will give way. I will give way.
Does that justify spending hours in council meetings talking about flags and Lord's Prayer and national anthems, and then not discussing things like the massive water crisis that we face?
Yes, it does, because what matters... Yes, it does, because if Reform UK do anything, if it is to restore this country back to being a proud Christian country that flies its flag with pride, then absolutely it's time well spent, and the British people will agree. So let's look at our record in local government. I'm going to make some progress. Let's look at our record in local government. Send, something that the parties opposite have failed on. Backlogs, gone. Wait times for ECHPs halved. Matter of public record. Just look at Northamptonshire. You mentioned social housing, nominated for most improved council when it comes to social housing, thanks to a new Reform administration. Just look at Lancashire, the racket of home-to-school transport. £3.8 million saved by giving children better transport to school, reallocated to highways to bring civic pride to a part of the country that had been completely ignored by the Tory party. And then just look at our fiscal prudence. I mentioned the exceptional financial hardship that the Conservative Party and the Liberal Democrats left local government. Soon, the great people of London will see in their London boroughs how the Green Party will soon destroy their finances. In Kent, you mentioned Kent, where, by the way, the Reform Party won not one, but two, but 3 by-elections from the Green Party, because the people of Kent have woken up to the fact that socialism doesn't work. But the Green Party are not socialism. The Green Party are not socialism. The Green Party are division and extremism, and they must be stamped out of British politics. I'll give way.
If we're that bad, how come Portland didn't reject your friend Matt over here?
One word: sectarism. Now I'll move on to our financial prudence, something I'm very proud of. If you take Kent alone, £144 million wiped off the debt, leaving the debt now at the council to be £590 million rather than £732 million inherited. By the way, that saves £1.2 million a year on interest alone. That's the difference a Reform Council makes. And why is that? Because 88% of our councillors are not career politicians. They've never even been a member of a political party. They are the people that the Uni Party have let down. And it's not just people that have been let down by the Uni Party. Look at all the students in here. You're still feeling the hangover from the previous coalition government where the Liberal Democrats totally took the mick out of the student vote, and you're all paying for it. Now let's look at net zero, the nonsense, the stupidity of net zero, which is costing our country a fortune and leaving hardworking families in misery. But I tell you something, the Green Party don't care about families going to food banks, but Reform UK do. That's why we've saved £39 million in Kent alone by getting rid of the ridiculous net zero commitments of that council. Now, I couldn't talk about governance locally if I didn't talk about the state of our roads. Anybody that has been to anywhere that the Conservative Party have run, or the Liberal Democrats, well, let me tell you that in Nottinghamshire we have a UK first. The biggest investment in road infrastructure in the history of local government in Britain. That's what Reform do in government. I'll give way.
Is this not because of the large rejection from central government to your county council for fixing potholes?
Unfortunately not, but nice try. I hate to tell you that's not the reason. Now, across the country, across the world, we have British overseas territories, and I appreciate the members opposite would like to give them away in a heartbeat, hard fought for by many servicemen of this country to whom we must honour and remember. The same people that also we remember wearing poppies, which some members of parties opposite don't also do. But let me tell you something. We have overseas territories across the world, and when you go to one, you get a sense of what it's like to be in Britain. And in Britain today, we have a new type of territory, and it's places that were allowed to vote. Places, let's never forget that the Labour and the Conservative Party tried to cancel elections, but where people were able to vote, we now have turquoise territories. Last year there was 12 of them, this year there are 34 of them. So if you're wondering whether the British people believe that Reform can govern, just look at the result of the election. 12 turquoise territories to 34 turquoise territories. I'll give way.
Do you think that 26% of the electorate is the British people speaking?
I believe it's democracy, and I appreciate some people don't like it, but the outcome of it was a Reform win, and a huge Reform win, from 1,000 councillors to 2,300 and something. I'm going to make some progress. So when we talk about Reform being ready for government, let's just remind ourselves why Reform are in a position to be ready for government. It is the failure of the political class and establishment, the failure of Parliament to represent, and the failure of political parties to govern this country. We heard earlier of my friend Siobhan White, the tragedy of her daughter, Rhiannon White, stabbed in the head, killed on her way home from work, left to die at the station where she was going home to see her son. That is the legacy of what the Conservative Party and the Labour Party have done to Britain. They have fundamentally broken Britain, leaving British citizens to bleed in the streets from murders from people that should never have been in this country in the first place. Not everybody that comes to Britain is a bad person, but a bad country doesn't control its borders. So, ladies and gentlemen, Madam Vice President, let me say this to you. We as a country have a choice at the next election, and I believe the choice is very clear. Save Britain or lose Britain. It is time for the entire United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland to be a turquoise territory. It is time for reform, and we are the fit to fix this country, and we are also ready to govern. And in the great words of my former MP for Epping Forest, Winston Churchill, I will leave this to my colleagues to always bear in mind. Success is not final. Failure is not fatal. It is the courage to continue that counts. We have the courage to save Britain. The British people have the courage to save Britain. And by God, we will save Britain. Thank you.
Thank you for that speech. I now call upon the final speaker on opposition, Councillor Rachel Millward, Deputy Leader of the Green Party.
Madam President, honourable members, good people of this House, thank you for staying so long. If you can still remember what Ben on the proposition said right at the beginning, he actually talked immediately about the anger, the fear, the frustration of the British public today. I agree, actually, with much of that. And yet, we look at this premise and think, what does make a political party fit to govern? We need leaders we can trust to tell the truth, with clear values and vision. Otherwise, who knows where they'll lead us? A party with a solid, evidence-based plan for leading the nation to the best possible life for the majority, with a stable economy that supports well-being and prosperity for all, and above all, a government that will keep our people safe. Sounds right? On national safety, then. Let's not forget Farage's response to the unnecessary, illegal war that Trump is raging on Iran. The moment it started, he declared we should do all we can to support the operation, that we are part of this with the Americans and the Israelis, leaping into wars without justification, at huge expense and enormous risk, at the whim and the behest of Trump and Netanyahu. That is not national security, that's recklessness. The war in Iran has also shown us that national security is inextricably linked to energy. National security is threatened by dependency on fossil fuels linked to unstable nations in the Middle East. Now, reform would have us abandon the climate targets that will deliver us energy sovereignty. It's economically illiterate. The Office of... Yes?
The question isn't about the climate targets. We're currently using gas every single day, every single minute to fill our energy. The question is, why don't we use our own rather than importing it from Qatar, from the USA, where it works for the climate?
Thank you.
Destroys jobs and people's lives in Aberdeen, where there's an industry involved in.
Thank you. That is a misunderstanding. Thank you for the point. It's a misunderstanding. If we got more gas and oil from the North Sea, it's a misunderstanding what happens. It goes on the international market. It doesn't come domestically. It's also a very small reserve which will be gone soon. And actually, there was a report that came out just last week, I think it was, that said, in fact, if reforms policies went ahead and we stopped net zero, that the impact on employment across Scotland would be devastating. So, in fact, it is economic illiteracy. In fact, the Office of Budget Responsibility has calculated that sticking with fossil fuels through to 2050 costs double what transitioning off them would. But Reform love a bit of flat earth climate denialism. You know, their draft manifesto contained nonsense like, Up to 10 times more people die of cold than warmth. In Roman Britain, 2,000 years ago, it was 2 degrees warmer. Grapes for wine were grown in Yorkshire.
This is all true.
Ridiculous. Ridiculous, though, but nothing to do with climate change. A total misunderstanding.
Point of order.
It's
Can I ask
ridiculous.
the speakers
It's
do not speak at
ignorant.
each other?
But friends, it is dangerous. This January, a national security assessment compiled by the Joint Intelligence Committee, on which sit the heads of MI5 and MI6, concluded that every critical ecosystem is on a pathway to collapse, and that conflict and military escalation will become more likely as nations compete for food, for water, and for arable land. This report was due to be published in October. The government buried it because its conclusions were too negative. Our own security services are telling us that we face an existential threat, and Reform's answer? Roman wine in Yorkshire. But you know, I guess you have to when your £2.4 million donation comes, or 2.4 million pounds of your donations come from people who dispute basic scientific facts about climate change. And when £24 million, 67% of your donations come from people with interests in fossil fuels. Now, of course, Reform's preference for impulsive international aggression will create and would create millions more forcibly displaced people across the world, people they would further demonize, and maybe that's what they want. They are hell-bent on undermining the principle of sanctuary, something we Brits have been proud to offer. Tens of million people in the UK were born overseas or are children of people who were. Our friends, our neighbours, our colleagues, the people who staff our NHS, the people who teach our children. Yet Reform would have ICE-style mass deportation, policies that would literally rip our country apart, unleashing social and economic chaos. It's a party whose leader has blatantly incited racially motivated violence on our streets, bidding people to respond to horrendous tragedy with pure, cold rage. And so we have riots, and words matter. This party does not care about our safety.
If you and Mr. Blackburn said earlier, and you've just said words matter, think carefully about how you describe somebody as inciting racial violence.
I will, thank you. And I'll tell you who else who has good reason to feel unsafe. Women. This is a party that would repeal the Equalities Act on day one. Reform has a woman problem.
What is a woman?
Absolutely absurd. Reform has a woman problem. And Matt, as you talked about horrendous abuse of women, but we know that the vast majority of women who suffer abuse at the hands of men, it is men that they know, often their partners. Farage has repeatedly called for the 24-week abortion limit to be cut, working with the American Christian right group that helped overturn Roe v. Wade. Farage describes Andrew Tate as an important voice for young men. And Matt, your proposal of a reverse child benefit, which would see childless women paying higher taxes. These are not the politics of a party that governs for everyone. These are the politics of control. I think I'm allowed 2 points of information.
That point is factually inaccurate. I wrote a blog based on the ideas of...
Matt. Mr. Goodwin, Mr. Goodwin, Mr. Goodwin, Mr. Goodwin, Mr. Goodwin, can I ask that you sit down? Thank you.
Now, the economy, where the mask really slips. Farage gave us Brexit. Championed for decades, sold on a fantasy, a demonstrable economic disaster. It's reduced trade, labour shortages, a decade of stagnation, ordinary people paying the price while he moved on to the next thing. And then when Liz Truss blew up the economy, crashing the pound, sending mortgages soaring, Farage called it the best Conservative budget since 1986. There's a pattern here. Their real agenda, hidden behind anti-immigration rhetoric, is something voters will reject as they see it. The UK's biggest problem is inequality. The mind-blowing reality that the top 50 families in this country have been able to hoard the wealth of the bottom 50%. Now, Reform want that to continue and to get worse. A 10-point cut in corporation tax, tax relief on private schools and private healthcare, a proposal to allow wealthy non-domiciles to avoid tax altogether in return for a one-off payment, a transfer of £34 billion from the public straight to the wealthy, while they'd slash public sector pensions affecting 9 million workers, strip benefits from hundreds of thousands of people, and bring more privatisation into the NHS. Once you accept that this is a party which values the super rich above everyone else, the question of integrity answers itself. It's no surprise that Farage, by far the highest earning MP in Parliament, has racked up more than £1.5 million on top of his salary in 18 months. And he's under investigation. We know about these donations. But be in no doubt, when it comes to a conflict of interest between what makes their donors wealthier and what is best for public good, the money will always win. It isn't corruption, says the people, says the men who talked on and on and on. It isn't corruption despite their values. It's corruption entirely consistent with their values. A party so violently obsessed with the interests of a vanishingly small elite that they will compromise on science, stir up violence, and risk national security for moments of macho. They are categorically not fit to govern, and I urge you to vote against this motion.